Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 14th of December, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I know I have been AWOL for a little while, everyone. I did not intend to go, I think, 2 weeks since the last episode. I did intend to do actually more episodes than usual, but it just didn't happen. And I know I'm doing this episode on a Saturday. That just shows you how, I guess, out of sync I am with the usual schedule of doing these episodes. But of course, there's been so much happening within the Ethereum ecosystem the last couple of weeks, especially a lot of things to get through today. But I did want to make a note again about what I said last time on the review, is that in the new year I'm definitely going to try to get back to some kind of regular cadence of episodes coming out. I don't know why, like specifically the last 2 weeks I just didn't do an episode. It just kept getting pushed back. I've been doing a lot of stuff around the house, and by the time I get to the point where I usually record a refuel, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, you know what, I'll just do an episode tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes the next day, and so on and so forth. But I'm here today, and as I said, there's tons to get through, so let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was this note that was put together by Tim Byko on GitHub here, all about everything that was discussed at Devcon around L1 research and development. So there's been a lot of, I guess, people talking about L1 R&D lately, maybe the last few months, and basically accelerating some of the upgrades that are coming to Ethereum L1. And there's so much stuff coming. And in this GitHub post here, Tim details this basically, or they'll post a bunch of notes here, and you can navigate through it on the left here. You can see the different sections, such as like the beam chain, issuance discussions, full data availability, sharding and sampling, and so on and so forth. But I felt this was a really good read to basically get a pulse of what's happening on the L1 side of things, because if I was to look further out into the future and kind of look 5 years out, this basically encapsulates the next 5 years worth of Ethereum L1 R&D. There are other things that are going around this and other things that will be added. Some stuff will be removed, so on and so forth. But really, we're on this 5-year journey that Justin, from today basically, that Justin Drake outlined in his Bankless Summit talk. I'm sure a lot of you saw that, have watched that, where essentially the beam chain is basically at the end of that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the beam chain later in the episode, but the beam chain is basically at the end of that, and what's going to be between now and when the beam chain kind of launches is a host of other L1 upgrades. And as I said, there's a lot of them detailed here. There's going to be more added as time goes on, and some of them will obviously be removed if we find that they're not something that we want to put into the L1. So if you want to get up to speed on the latest and greatest, this is definitely something to read here. I mean, you could spend so much time on this because there's not only the notes here, there's also links to all of the further research and information that's going on here. But do keep in mind that a lot of this stuff will evolve and change over time. You know, something that you read today may be completely changed. There's discussions right now about the fact that vertical trees may not be the thing that we implement as part of kind of the Verge. It might be something else. There is discussions from Vitalik around maybe doing Starks or Snark, I should say, based trees or binary trees. I mean, a lot of this is obviously over my head because I'm not a cryptographer, but there is stuff like that that's going to be changing as time goes on there. But anyway, I'll link this in the YouTube description below. You guys can go check it out for yourself. But as I said, it is probably the best, I think, thing you can read right now when it comes to ETH L1 R&D, just to get a pulse of where everything is at. All right, so speaking of ETH L1, kind of what's happening there, the Ethereum core developers Twitter account here basically has outlined a few of the short-term, medium-term, and long-term things that are happening on the Ethereum L1. In terms of short-term, there is a gas limit increase that is currently in motion. The gas limit isn't going to 60 million, which is double from where it is today. It started at 30 million. It's at 30 million today. You know, you saw some people, including myself, advocating for a 60 million gas limit, but I was only really advocating for that as a kind of negotiation tactic where I knew it wasn't going to happen. So I'm glad that we settled for less. And it seems like we've settled for a 36 million increase. So basically going from 30 to 36 million. And that's happening right now, essentially. I think there's 3 or 4% of the network currently signaling to increase the gas limit. That needs to get to more than 50% for the gas limit to move to 36 million. And the reason why we're not going beyond that is actually because there was a small bug found in the various clients that was basically left over, I think, from maybe the merge that's being fixed, where essentially if we went above 40 million gas, the network would become unstable because of this particular bug, not because of any of the other concerns that we've kind of talked about on the refill before, such as bandwidth concerns and so on and so forth there. So the gas limit is being raised, but right now, it's only being raised to 36 million, but the goal is, and I've seen some core developers tweet about this, the goal is to essentially get us to over 100 million gas limit by the end of next year, which is I think it's pretty ambitious and it requires a bunch of things to go into the network, but I think we could probably do it in the next 12 to 18 months. So a lot of exciting stuff happening there. Then in terms of the medium term, there's statelessness, which, as I mentioned before, may not end up being vertical trees. It may be something else that is probably going to go in the fork after Fusaka, so in Amsterdam. This may happen end of 2026, early 2027, so it's still a little while away, but that is definitely happening there. And then EIP quadruple 4, which is history expiry. As I discussed last time, the first phase of this is actually going live on May 1st. And as I discussed, I think on the refuel last time, phase 1 of EIP quadruple 4 does not require a hard fork. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to expire all history before the merge, essentially. So what that means is that we can safely increase the gas limit even more because the chain isn't going to grow. And I think I explained this on the refuel last time, is not going to grow so big that you're going to have to change your SSD. I think that the plan is really to try and keep the chain size below 2 terabytes. And I think that we can get there with a lot of the various things that we're doing with state expiry and history expiry. But that's all part of EIP quadruple 4 there. And then longer term, and this is, I guess, like at the probably end game here in terms of like the end of the 5 years roadmap that we're currently on, which is snarkifying the EVM. So essentially, you can see here it's described as this is one of the major components of the beam chain and means that full nodes will not have to natively re-execute every transaction. All they will need to do is verify a proof. This will allow us to pump the gas by orders of magnitude. And orders of magnitude here literally means like many orders of magnitude. Like you could imagine gigagas. Like that's kind of what we're targeting here at L1. At L2, it's gonna be there at L2 before L1 gets there. Most definitely. But at L1, getting to gigagas is a huge deal. And it's a longer term thing, as I said. It's not going to happen in the short to medium term here. So those are the short, medium term, long term kind of stuff happening on L1. There was also this tweet put out by David Krappus here, who talked about the low-hanging fruits to scale Ethereum execution. Now, this is execution at L1. Obviously, we're scaling Ethereum execution at L2, and there are a bunch of different L2s doing this in different ways, and there are a bunch of new L2s, like they're calling themselves high-performance L2s coming out, such as Mega ETH and Rise, but this is essentially what we can do at L1, and what David considers to be low-hanging fruits, and he was basically discussing this with Dan Craig and Ansgar. Essentially, we can basically do something for the fee market, so we can reprice inflated opcodes such as call data. Call data right now is essentially, I think, like too cheap, so making that more expensive so that we can essentially reprice that one. But there's also other opcodes that are going to be repriced there. Increasing the limit by 2x and target by 3x of the fee market, and ship multi-dimensional fees. Now, this is something that's been in the works for a little while, but we already have multi-dimensional fees for the normal L1 fee market and blobs. So what this means is essentially the normal L1 fee market and the blob fee market are separate fee markets. They don't affect each other. So the goal would be to basically have separate fee markets for per opcode, essentially. And I don't know if it'd be every opcode, but essentially you would have it so that one part of the state isn't affecting another part of the state. And this has been, as I said, in the works for quite a while. I believe Solana has a similar implementation of this, probably not the exact same implementation that Ethereum L1 would have, but a similar implementation. And I think it's like there are pros and cons to it. I've called out the cons before, especially in the Daily Gwei Discord channel, where essentially I say that if there's only one part of the state that's really under contention, then that part of the state is essentially subsidizing the whole chain. So it's kind of funny when you think about it and think about the economic incentives here and think about maybe some of the, I guess, economic games that can be played here. It definitely requires further research and so on and so forth into that. But then David also mentioned state, so we can essentially delay the state route by one slot, which I believe is being worked on right now, actually, and will end up in a hard fork sooner rather than later. State expiry and potentially state rent. I mentioned state expiry before. State rent has been something that's been discussed for a while. Like, I'm talking maybe 5+ years on Ethereum. What this means is that essentially you have to pay for the state that you want to occupy on the chain, or to keep hot on the chain. Otherwise, it essentially gets expired, and then if you want to re-enable that state on the chain or kind of reactivate it, you have to present a proof, I think, or some kind of thing like that. It's been a while since I looked at the actual specs for it, and I'm sure a lot of things have changed, but that is definitely something that's been looked at. And of course, statelessness as part of the Verge upgrade there, and then slot anatomy will essentially optimize into slot boundaries, more efficient networking, and cut slot time by 2 to 4 seconds. So slots in Ethereum is essentially Ethereum's block time. So every 12 seconds there's a slot. The block is technically 4 seconds of that, but essentially you could think of 12 seconds as like the block time. So we want to cut that down to 2 to 4 seconds. That's part of the beam chain upgrade as well, of course, and then optimize a bunch of different things and have more efficient networking there. And then also David mentions protocol participants. We obviously want full nodes for auditability. That's what Ethereum's been designed around. Solo stakers needed for censorship resistance, and think seriously about the requirements for these roles in a post-fossil or fossil world. And I've discussed fossil before. It's basically the implementation of inclusion lists that looks like it's going to make it into the network, not in Pectra, but potentially in Fusaka there. But you can go check out David's tweet for yourself if you want to look into any of this stuff. But that's a lot of stuff that's low-hanging fruit that David calls here that is potentially coming to L1 in the next 12 to 18 months there. All right, so as I mentioned, the gas limit is going up to 36 million right now, and Justin Drake tweeted about this. So essentially, what I really wanted to talk about was the fact that a lot of this discussion around the gas limit being increased is not so much that we think it's going to be like a huge scalability unlock for L1 or it's going to like move the needle or anything like that. Because if you really think about the, I guess, majority of the L1 participants at this point, it's a lot of big money players. You can actually see this on chain. For example, if you're like a big money player and you have like 10, 100 million, potentially even $1 billion, you're really not going to care about a $100 fee. And the fees aren't even that high right now on L1. But if you're, for example, getting into a Athena position as a whale. Say you've got $10 million of stables and you're like, you know what? I want to go farm Athena with it. To do that, it's not costing you $100 today. But if you look at it as a percentage, if you are going to make 20% on your $10 million that you're putting in there, that's $2 million a year. And within like a few minutes, you're going to recoup the gas fees that you spent. So you're not even thinking about gas fees at that level. So and by bumping up the gas limit, even like 10x from here, we bring the fees down to, let's just say all else being equal, instead of the fees being $100, that would be $10. Do you think someone with $10 million is actually going to feel that? No, they're not going to feel that at all. And that L1, a $10 fee for a regular user is still way too high. That's why we have L2s. That's why we want fees to be 1 cent or lower. So it's not necessarily about scaling the L1 for the end user. It's about two main things, really. And I think I've discussed this before. It's signaling that we are doing stuff at the L1. We are committed to upgrading the L1. We are committed to scaling it. So it's more of a social signal there. And I know that people who listen to the Refuel obviously know that a lot of L1 upgrades are in the pipeline, but your average kind of user does not. And your average participant in crypto does not. So it's a way to signal that. And secondly, it's just better overall to make sure that we keep up with hardware over time, because as Justin mentioned here, the last time the gas limit was raised was 3.5 years ago. And in that time, both hardware, which isn't really the bottleneck, but bandwidth has also improved for bandwidth's kind of harder to measure, but like for a lot of people, you would say that in the last 3.5 years, bandwidth has definitely gotten better there. But as I mentioned last time on the Refuel, my preferred way of upping the gas limit from here on out would be for the clients to essentially say, okay, well, every time we do like a client release in 6-month kind of periods of time, we do a gas limit increase of like 5 million, or it'll probably be based on a percentage or something like that. Let's just say 10% or 20%. And if something breaks, if the network becomes unstable or whatever, we roll it back essentially. And that's a good way of doing it because one, it lets us keep up with the, I guess, development in hardware and bandwidth and the advancements there. But two, it doesn't mean that we have to like every, 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, whatever it is, have to go to the community and do this massive push. So it becomes more automated in a way. And the community can still veto this. They've still got control over it because they can still manually set it in their own clients if they want to. But honestly, if the client devs are okay with doing this, then it should be okay because they're the ones who know the clients obviously the best. They know the network very well. They're the ones who should really be not necessarily making these decisions, but making the recommendations that other people should take into consideration more so than just some random saying we should increase the gas limit. It's like, okay, well, yes, but like, why are we doing it? Is it healthy to do it? Is the network going to fall over? So on and so forth. So essentially, that was my take on the gas limit there. And then Justin also mentioned, when are we getting gigagas at L1? And as I mentioned before, this comes with snarked execution clients or snarked Ethereum, and they're key to scaling gas by up to 1000x. So that's just like a ridiculous amount from here. That does materially move the needle of L1. It does make a big difference. But the blockers right now are sub slot, so sub 12 seconds, or if the slots go down to 2 to 4 seconds, sub 2 to 4 second slot, ZK EVM proving latency, which is coming down a lot over time. And I think that there's a lot of ZK bulls who believe that by 2026, we're going to have real-time proving and then one slot delayed state routes, which I don't know if it's in Pectra. I don't think so. It's probably going to go into Fusaka, but we don't know yet. And as Justin mentions here, Charlie from Paradigm is cooking an EIP for delayed state routes, which could hit Fusaka in early 2026. And Justin thinks that real-time proving will be ready by then. That is really the holy grail, real-time proving. And if we can get that done in the next 12 to 18 months, then bring it on. Like, bring on as much L1 scale as we can kind of get, because it doesn't detract from the L2s. It definitely doesn't. It basically enhances the L2s as well. That's another reason, honestly, to scale the L1, is because it enhances the L2s. And technically, we are scaling the L1 for the L2s via blobs, right? Because the blobs live on L1. And in Pectra, as you guys know, we're basically doubling the blob capacity there. But yeah, a lot of stuff happening on L1, as I said. I've spent half of this episode already talking about L1 stuff. And I think I've got more to talk about when it comes to L1. Yes, so this was, again, on the gas limit. This was some research that Toni put together, essentially a bunch of research on gas limits generally, how clients handle them, and I think he calls out the, I guess, bug that was found that basically puts a constraint on going above 40 million gas right now, and essentially he thinks that we should wait for Pectra to go beyond 40 million, which I think I kind of agree with here. And then he basically put out a call for patience and collaboration, and this is what I think that we should be doing. People always want things to happen quickly, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, Ethereum is moving, I think, as quickly as it can. I honestly don't think Ethereum can be moving quicker than what it is today. Because you got to think, if we want to move Ethereum quicker, what do we have to sacrifice to do that? Because as it exists today, we have to coordinate with 10 different teams at least, and that's just core client teams, in order to upgrade the network. That's not including all the other stakeholders, like the infrastructure providers, the exchanges, the users, the solo stakers. We have to coordinate with all of these different people in order for a hard fork to happen. So just getting to the stage where we can do a hard fork is not a trivial thing. So if we wanted to move faster, what would we sacrifice? Well, we may sacrifice some client teams. Maybe some of these clients are like, well, you guys are moving way too quickly right now. We can't keep up with this, so we're not going to bother maintaining our client. Like, that is a real risk. Or we could move too fast and break something on the network. And if Ethereum goes offline, that will be the first time in Ethereum's history that it has gone offline. That would be a huge hit to Ethereum's credibility. That, in my mind, is pretty much irrecoverable or irreversible. I should say reversible. I can't even say the other word. But yeah, in my mind, it's basically irreversible, because essentially you shatter the confidence that Ethereum has built up. You shatter that Lindy effect that Ethereum has built up, all in the name of moving maybe slightly faster. Maybe you can juice out an extra 3 months and say, okay, we're moving 3 months faster than we normally are. I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the risk here. I don't think it's worth the network falling over. I don't think it's worth it from a competitive point of view either, because if you actually look at the competitors that Ethereum has today, they're not moving all that fast either. Everyone compares Ethereum to all these other chains. Once you reach a certain size, you get bogged down by all the same stuff Ethereum is getting bogged down by the fact that the ecosystem's so big, you have to coordinate with all these different players, you have a lot of politics involved too. Any ecosystem that says that they're immune to politics is bullshitting you. You're not immune to politics, you're not immune to bureaucracy. As long as humans are involved, there's going to be politics and bureaucracy. And within Ethereum, it's such a massive ecosystem of thousands of people that have an influence on the core protocol, let alone the L2s, that you do have a lot of politics. You do have a lot of bureaucracy. And honestly, the fact that there's so many disparate groups working together in a decentralized way around the globe, there's no central party telling them what to do. The fact that anything even gets done in the first place is amazing to me. And the fact that we actually are not only doing things, but we're doing them at a faster pace than we ever have, because 2024 was the year of the most EIPs proposed. And also Pectra will be the biggest hard fork in Ethereum's history. And on top of that, we have all the L2s doing stuff too. Like, the fact that any of it even works to begin with is incredibly bullish at Ethereum scale. Like, no other ecosystem, even the smaller ones, are moving as fast as Ethereum is, I believe, across all fronts there. But Anyway, you can go give Tony's post a read for yourself if you want to. Still on the L1 topic here, Christine Kim put out a nice tweet thread regarding Pectra. This is probably old now. I think this was from like a week ago, and she was covering the previous 2 weeks. So essentially, Pectra, as I mentioned, will double blob capacity. The increase of call data cost, EIP 7623, is also in Pectra, so great to see that there. The EIP to increase the minimum blob base fee is not in for now. Which is EIP 7762, that was removed. I think that makes sense because I guess like blobs are in price discovery now, and essentially like it's not urgent. It's not really an urgent EIP to begin with. It's like a nice to have, and considering that we're already changing a bunch of stuff, it's probably not prudent to do a major change to the blob fee market here in the same hard fork as other things. So yeah, that makes sense there. So essentially there are a bunch of other EIPs as well. I mean, you can go give a read of Christine's thread here, but we're approaching the point where I'm pretty sure like very soon, if not like pretty much any day now, it's going to be frozen. And what that basically means is that where there's going to be no more EIP additions or removals. I think we're on DevNet 5 almost, and then we're going to start doing the testnets in the new year. In terms of when we see Pectra on mainnet, I would suspect like late March into April at this point. But honestly, I'm still thinking March. Like we'll see how it goes, see how the DevNets go and everything. But yeah, March, April is kind of my target there for Pectra. All right, so I mentioned before I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Beam chain. So Superfizz shared this great Reddit post that Bergmanskasse. I've completely butchered that name, but that's their name there. You can see it on Reddit. Talking about what the impact of the Beam chain is from, I guess, like, not like an explain like I'm 5, but in like simple language that you can understand. And I just wanted to highlight this for you guys because it is a great read, and I highly recommend going and reading it. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But the TLDR is that you're not bullish enough on the Beam chain. And as I said, I think when I first covered the Beam chain, I think everyone focused way too much on the 5-year timeline and did not focus on what is actually being delivered by the Beam chain and how it is really the end game for Ethereum, and the fact that there's so much other stuff happening in between now and then anyway, that the Beam chain is going to just be this thing that happens eventually, and you'll be like, wow, that happened, that came out of nowhere. So yeah, anyway, go give this a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so there was a new staking protocol called, or maybe not protocol, but like initiative called Solo that was introduced. I think this is old now. Yeah, I haven't done a refuel for so long. This is like almost 2 weeks old now. So this is called Solo. It's a protocol that lets anyone run an Ethereum validator with just 1.25 ETH instead of 32 ETH. It enables an LST backed by the portion of a validator's stake unlikely to be lost without relying on governance or trusted hardware. So essentially how it works is that you put ETH in, and then you mint Solo tokens, which is backed by up to 96.1 of the staked ETH, and our dynamic funding rate keeps Solo pegged to ETH. And there's a little diagram of how this works here and how it works in practice. Essentially, the Solo is a representation of the Solo, a token is a representation of the ETH that is staked here, and that can freely trade on the open market. And how the ETH is originally, how the remaining ETH, so if you put 1.25 ETH in, how the other ETH is acquired is that it's acquired via a flash loan from Aave or something like that, and then the Solo backs that up, and the flash loan is repaid using the ETH that I assume you would get from selling Solo, or if Solo was on Aave, you could probably do it that way. But yeah, then at least that's my understanding. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this because I think like reading through this, I read it through a couple of times to make sure I understood it there, but that's the kind of gist to it. I think it's really cool because, as Diego, the I assume founder, says here, is that it's a hugely lower barrier of entry for validators. There is a one fungible permissionless LST across all validators because Solo is the LST here. No trusted hardware, no governance, no additional token requirements. Market-based funding rate, and it leverages Pectra's EIP 7002 and EIP 7251. I believe 7002 is the execution layer withdrawals, and 7251 is, of course, max EB, I believe. I'm going to look that up quickly because I want to make sure that I'm getting that right. Yeah, it is. 7251 is max EB. As you guys know, that's the EIP that allows you to stake more than 32 ETH per validator. So yeah, if you want to go check this out, you can. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But great to see more initiatives around Solo staking ETH, especially ones that are governance less and aren't just like a new protocol that looks the same as every other protocol. Something novel, something interesting. So yeah, you can go check that out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so Optimism shared a Twitter thread all about their new Superchain ERC20's kind of token standard here. So essentially, you can think of these this Superchain ERC20 as an interface for cross-chain tokens to move across the superchain. So it's combined with native interoperability. It will make this superchain feel borderless. So essentially, how it works is that some token on chain A that can be used within a game on chain B, some token on chain C that gets lended on a pool in chain D. So and there's no need to bridge or anything like that. It all is just like interoperable, like it is on Ethereum L1, for example. So very, very cool way of doing interoperability between different superchain, I guess, like chains. So this will not apply across the different, I guess, L2 ecosystems. It would apply across like Base and OP Mainnet and Unichain and Zora and all the other chains that are part of the superchain or will be part of the superchain in the future. So just another way to do interoperability between the different chains out there. Not the be all end all, but I think this is really cool because I think one of the complaints for a lot of people, I guess the biggest complaint for a lot of people, is the asset fragmentation. Not so much the, I guess, UX fragmentation of having to have, apps being on different chains. For example, there'll be an app on like Base that's not another chain, so you have to bridge. It's not necessarily about that. It's about the fact that your assets could be on multiple chains. And if you just want to stay on one chain, you have to go get those assets from that other chain, right? Or you have to bridge across or anything like that. So with this, essentially, you wouldn't have to do that. It would just feel seamless. It would feel like it would feel when you're using just like one chain. And that really is the end goal and the end game of Ethereum broadly, and its L2 roadmap broadly, is for everything to feel like one chain. So this is another initiative, and you can go give this thread a read if you would like. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so I put out a tweet the other day where I said, it's been said before, but it's worth repeating. Ethereum DeFi will be the biggest winner of a crypto-friendly US admin. It has years of Lindy, it's battle-tested, it's trusted and mature, with tens of billions of dollars of TVL, all secured by Ethereum, which is the most robust settlement layer in existence. Now, the reason I said this was because I think I've talked about this on the refuel before, but for the last 2 years at least, there has been a boot on the neck of crypto. And it's not just crypto, it's Ethereum specifically. Because if you actually look at all of the high-profile companies that the SEC or projects that the SEC went after and sued, it's all pretty much Ethereum. So if you look at the lawsuits against Coinbase, for example, that is still Ethereum because Base is Ethereum. That's an L2 on Ethereum. They're building within the Ethereum ecosystem. USDC is on Base, which is on Ethereum. The stablecoin's there. So Coinbase is a huge Ethereum ally. They were sued. Kraken, same thing, sued. Huge Ethereum ally, building an L2. Uniswap, obviously Ethereum, right? Sued. There was a few others out there. Consensus, sued. Before the ETH ETFs were approved, there was a lot of stuff happening in the background with the SEC trying to classify ETH as a security or subpoenaing different teams out there to do that. So, and I'm forgetting teams here off the top of my head, but you can see the common thread here. It really did affect Ethereum the most, and Ethereum DeFi in particular the most as well. Now, with the new admin coming in, with the inauguration happening on January 20th, with Trump coming in as president, and then with Gary Gensler's replacement coming in a few weeks after that, I think it takes a little while for the replacement to come in, but it seems like it's going to be a bullish replacement, and with a bunch of different things moving there, and with the fact that Trump is building an Ethereum DeFi protocol, I mean, not him, obviously, but like the people around him and his team, and the fact that we have like ETH ETFs already approved, which means that we're probably going to have staked ETH ETFs next. There's just like a lot of things that are going to be unlocked for Ethereum DeFi. And I really do believe it will be the biggest winner of a crypto-friendly US admin because it already is big. And as we know, liquidity begets liquidity. If you actually look at the TVL of Ethereum compared to all the other chains, even the chains that have gotten a lot of growth so far, their TVL growth has not grown that much. Like if I'm calling out a chain here, I'll call out Solana. There's a lot of activity on there, obviously. But as I've said before, it's mostly meme coin activity. And there's nothing wrong with that. But their actual DeFi ecosystem, like their core DeFi ecosystem, which is measured really by TVL, has not really grown that much. Nowhere near as much as the meme coin stuff has. And obviously, people trade meme coins on dexes. That grows the DeFi volumes for Solana. But if we're talking about like the long-term sustainable stuff, the other things you can do within DeFi, such as like lending and borrowing, getting stablecoin yields, LSTs, restaking within DeFi, right? All that sorts of stuff. That's mostly happening on Ethereum, within Ethereum DeFi. And Ethereum, I believe, has $80 billion of TVL right now. Stablecoins are mostly on Ethereum. Like, it really is Ethereum and Tron. Like, that's stablecoins for you. Tron has like $60 billion worth of stablecoins. I think Ethereum has 105 billion. So really, it's all happening on Ethereum. Now, it's all happening on Ethereum, even in the face of that really aggressive admin that we've had the last 2 years. So what do you think happens once we have a friendly admin? Once all that stuff happens, once the Trump admin gets in, it's going to be a huge unlock, I think, for Ethereum DeFi. We're going to see a lot of these traditional finance players who didn't or couldn't get into DeFi before, specifically on Ethereum, are going to get in. And I wouldn't even be surprised to see, and I know this maybe is a little bit far-fetched, but I've mentioned it before, but I wouldn't even be surprised to see one of these big TradFi institutions creating their own L2 on Ethereum. You know, my dream, or one of the things that I would really love to see, is for BlackRock and their partners to launch a new stock exchange on Ethereum as an L2 to trade real-world assets like stocks, like bonds, like commodities like gold and silver and all that. I would love for that to happen, because real-world assets is another thing that's been happening, and that's going to happen in a really big way once the admin change is over, and that's mostly happening on Ethereum as well. So you can imagine a world where we do have an Ethereum L2 new stock exchange. That's an Ethereum L2 that is really optimized to trade real-world assets. And yes, it'll be completely centralized, but that's because real-world assets are centralized to begin with. But the whole point is that it exists in the new economy, the new internet, the new kind of, I guess, like financial layer that is Ethereum. And that's what excites me. Like, I don't even care if it's centralized. Like, I am a decentralization maxi, but I also understand that there are certain things that are always going to be centralized. You can't have decentralized real-world assets, because those assets, by definition, live in the real world, right? Like, for example, if you're tokenizing your house, that's not a decentralization. There's no decentralization thing there. The property right that you have of your house, of the physical land that your house is on, is granted to you by the government, and the government really is the ultimate arbiter of that. But when you have a digitally native asset such as ETH, no one's the arbiter of that. The Ethereum network is. That's the ultimate source of truth. That's the ultimate settlement layer for ETH. But the ultimate settlement layer for a house, for property, for real estate, is the government, is the state, local governments. They're the ultimate settlement layer for that. So tokenizing that and putting it on a blockchain doesn't, even if it's on Ethereum L1, doesn't make it decentralized at all. It's an IOU, essentially, just like stablecoins are today. The stablecoin, me having $1,000 of USDC in my Ethereum address, I don't have $1,000 of USD. I have $1,000 of USDC that has a claim on USD and that is valued as USD. But the real USD that's backing that up is in a bank account controlled by Circle. So you see, like, the ultimate settlement layer of USDC is Circle's bank account. But they use crypto rails for efficiency, to get access to broader markets, to export their business to a broader set of participants. And that's exactly the same thing that would happen with BlackRock's potential. Like, I don't know anything here, I'm speculating, but BlackRock, like, if they did with their partners, because they've talked about wanting to do a new stock exchange, but they did it as an Ethereum L2, it would be completely centralized, but that's fine. They get to basically settle down to Ethereum L1 as an L2, so get that essential security there, get the efficiency of an L2, and get the efficiency of being able to plug in to Ethereum L1 and the rest of the broader crypto ecosystem to do their real-world asset trading platforms here. So that's one thing that I'm definitely super excited about there. But I haven't been this excited about Ethereum DeFi in a while, guys, just because I know that there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. There's going to be, like, ICOs are going to come back. I think there's going to be profit sharing on tokens. There's just going to be so much stuff happening, so much building happening. And really, if you think about it, it's going to be at least 4 years of this, or maybe 2. I mean, it depends on the midterms and what happens there. But let's just say, like, the midterms go the way of the Republicans and we have 4 years of this. 4 years ago was the last bull market. So we could be having this during not only the bull market, but also the bear market, which is even better, because in the bear market, that's where most of the building gets done anyway. So it's really cool that we have this. And that's just assuming that the Republicans don't win again in 4 years. Maybe they win again. Then we can have 8 years of this. Like, it's just crazy when you think about this. And maybe in 4 years' time, I don't know if this will happen, if the Republicans don't win, maybe the Democrats have changed their tune and this shit isn't partisan anymore. And essentially what you get is a healthy US ecosystem for crypto, no matter what political party is in power there. But anyway, that's my bull case going forward for Ethereum DeFi. All right, last thing to talk about was this little image that was created by, I believe, Josh Stark, which essentially is describing what Ethereum and ETH are and how they're basically interlinked, like yin and yang here. So Ethereum is the world computer and ETH is money. And these two things are linked. ETH, as I said, it ultimately settles on Ethereum L1. Ethereum L1 is secured by ETH. One cannot exist without the other. But in saying that, the Ethereum network can do much more and does do much more than just secure ETH, than just settle ETH. It settles tokens, right? ERC20 tokens. It settles DeFi activity. It settles L2s. It settles so many different things out there. And obviously, like we all know and love Ethereum. We use it every day. So we know that Ethereum is not just a platform to secure ETH. It is a platform to do everything. And that's why we call it the world computer. And yes, it's not like a supercomputer or anything like that. It doesn't have much power. Like Ethereum L1, if you looked at it from in I guess like a performance metric in terms of like how much you have to spend to get out of it, it is one of the weakest computers to ever exist, essentially, at least in modern times for sure. So we're not saying it's a supercomputer, but what it is that it's a world computer. And in other words, it is a trust layer. It is a settlement layer. It is something that you can basically go to and know that is ultra secure, and it's secured by a worldwide distributed set of validators, distributed set of full nodes and node operators out there. And you can have very high security guarantees, very high settlement guarantees that essentially what you're doing on there is what's going to happen as long as it's within the rules. So for example, if you're sending ETH to someone on the other side of the world on Ethereum L1, you can be sure that that ETH is getting to that person on the other side, and it is being secured and backed up by $100 billion of economic security, which is the staked ETH, and also by those tens of thousands of node operators that exist around the world. You do not get those guarantees from anything else. Maybe Bitcoin to an extent, but it's debatable at this point because I think Bitcoin, people don't want to admit it, but Bitcoin's quite centralized right now. I think there's two mining pools, the KYC mining pools in the US that account for more than 50% of the hash power. And I know mining pools are not equal to miners, but the miners are incredibly concentrated too, because mining is a game of economies of scale, and it has become very, very centralized over time. Whereas Ethereum, on the other hand, has become more decentralized over time. There is a great distribution of node operators around the world, and also we have amazing client diversity. So even if something goes wrong with one of the clients, we have backup clients, we have fallback clients, we have the network not going offline. So you have all these great guarantees on this world computer. And then on the other side of things, you have ETH as money, as a decentralized money, as a store of value, as a commodity money. This thing can be used everywhere in the Ethereum ecosystem. Everywhere that something exists, an app, wherever it exists, on L2s or L1s or L3s, wherever it is, even on other chains, you can use your ETH as money. Now, of course, you have different security guarantees depending on what you're interacting with. If you're just sending ETH back and forth with someone on Ethereum L1, you have the full security of Ethereum L1, full settlement guarantees backing that up. But if you put your ETH into an L2, well, depending on the L2, maybe it's at stage 0, has a multi-sig, you could potentially lose that ETH because that L2 could rug, for example. Low chance, of course, but that's the example I think is worth giving there. Or it could be exploited as well because it's in a smart contract, right? So there are different guarantees here, but regardless of all of that, ETH is still money. ETH is still a store of value. People speculate on it as a store of value. They store their value there. I mean, I have over since 2017 when I first started buying ETH, I've stored my value there because I've increased my purchasing power considerably by doing that, not only against the US dollar, but also against my local currency of Australian dollars. So I do that. And so many other people do that as well. And I expect that to continue into the future. That's kind of how I benchmark things. But also I use my ETH in DeFi. I use my ETH as money. I use my ETH to do things with. And that's what a lot of people do. And you can actually see this on the ETH is Money website that I launched alongside Bankless a few weeks ago at the Bankless Summit here. And the Grow the Pie team built this website. So you can kind of scroll down and you can see where ETH is within the Ethereum economy. We've exported millions of ETH to these different kind of L2s and different side chains here. As you can see, the Polygon POS, it's not technically an L2, it is a side chain, but you can see the ETH is being exported here. And then ETH is held as a store of value by various different parties around the ecosystem. You can see ETH's issuance rate here, how it's algorithmic now, and how it's only gone down over time, and how it is basically net deflationary since the merge. And then you can learn more about ETH as money and what constitutes money and so on and so forth, and also join the community as well. There's a Discord community that you can join. You can register your interest and you'll get invited to it. But essentially, the main point here is that ETH is money. ETH is decentralized money for the decentralized world computer. Yin and yang, one cannot exist without the other. And I think on that note, that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next time. Thanks, everyone.